Hello Marvel fans and welcome back to Nerd Doc. Marvel's next Thor adventure is finally here, and this video explains the ending of Thor Love and Thunder while covering some of the main plot points as well. There will be Thor Love and Thunder spoilers, but if you do not wish to be spoiled, you can check out our spoiler-free review linked in the description below. As always, be sure to check out all of our other Thor Love and Thunder videos covering the post-credits scene, exploring what's next for Thor and Jane, and taking a look at a new character added to the MCU in one of the post-credits scenes. Since Love and Thunder is still in theaters, we can't show you actual footage beyond what's in the trailers, so please bear with us there. There are also chapter timestamps, so you can jump around the video if you want to go straight to the ending. If you have any questions about the plot or ending of Thor Love and Thunder, or just want to give your opinion on the film, leave a comment below. And last but not least, you can find a link to our Instagram in the description below, where we post daily Marvel news and rumors, so be sure to give us a like there. First, let's get some basic information about the movie out of the way. The Guardians of the Galaxy are only in the movie for maybe about 10 minutes. Many of them only have a couple of lines at best, with Star-Lord having the most to say. Daryl, from Thor's various Marvel shorts, is also in the movie, giving tours of New Asgard and helping Valkyrie with various King stuff. Darcy also gets a little bit of screen time. Actor Thor and actor Loki are back, with Luke Hemsworth and Matt Damon reprising their roles respectively, and Melissa McCarthy is now actor Hela. Tom Hiddleston's only appearance is just a flashback scene during Korg's retelling of Thor's history that you see a bit of in the trailer. It shows all the times Loki has died in the MCU so far. In this movie, Korg is kind of like Michael Peña's character in Ant-Man, but not as entertaining. Korg gives audiences all the info they need on Thor and Jane in a big exposition dump. Moving forward, we're mostly going to refer to Mighty Thor as Jane, just to make it easier to understand who we're talking about instead of calling them Thor and Mighty Thor. But anytime they're fighting, Jane is always Mighty Thor. You only see her as Jane a handful of times throughout the movie. If you watched our review video of Thor Love and Thunder, you already know that while Gorr the God Butcher is great, this isn't his movie. This is the Thor and Jane show. The movie opens with Marvel fanfare, which is in the vein of 80s rock music instead of the normal fanfare. A truncated version of Gorr's comic book origin is the first scene, where his daughter dies of starvation and he runs into the aftermath of a battle between two gods, one being the flower god of Gorr's people. The other unnamed fallen god had the Necrosword, but this is not Null. At this point, it seems unlikely we'll get the symbiote god in the MCU anytime soon. The movie is less than 2 hours long, so they speed through Gorr's story, losing a lot of the meaning. Gorr kills his god with the Necrosword when he realizes the gods don't care about the people who worship them, then goes through the galaxy killing other gods, but you don't actually see any of that. You only hear about it secondhand. The planet where Thor and the Guardians are fighting is one that Gorr has already been to. Gorr killed their god, which left the people of the planet unprotected, so Thor and the Guardians are taking care of some invaders. At this point, Thor does not know about Gorr. Thor decides he needs to be on his own, and the Guardians leave immediately after the battle. To thank Thor, the native people give him 2 goats, which are the same goats he has in the comics, Tooth Gnasher and Tooth Grinder. The goats scream just like the screaming goat meme that went viral in 2008. They do this quite a few times throughout the movie, more than you might expect. Lady Sif sends out a distress call in relation to Gorr killing a bunch of gods. Sif was on the planet where Gorr killed Falagar the Behemoth, the giant beast who was a patron god of the galactic frontier in the comics. Also of note, Falagar was also killed by Gorr in the comics. Thor, Korg, and the goats go to Sif as she's laying on the ground near Falagar. Sif has lost an arm, which is an indirect nod to the comics when Gorr loses an arm fighting Thor. Thor takes Sif back to Earth just as Gorr is attacking New Asgard with his shadow monsters, which are the MCU equivalent of Gorr's Black Berserkers from the comics. Marvel probably made this change because the Black Berserkers in the comics look very similar to Thanos' Army of Beasts in the MCU, and they wanted to differentiate them. We find out that Jane has stage 4 cancer, which she's known for about 6 months. We also learn later in the movie that her mother died of cancer, which isn't something that happens in the comics. The movie never says what kind of cancer Jane has, but in the comics it's breast cancer. According to Korg, in the time between movies, Jane and Thor were living together for some time. Jane wrote a book, The Foster Theory, about Einstein-Rosen bridges, also known as wormholes, and what is the scientific name for the Bifrost, so she's more famous within the MCU now. Thor has had his various Avengers duties, and over time they grew apart. Since Thor was gone all the time, Jane left him a note breaking up with him, which Thor still hasn't gotten over. Jane is trying to cure the cancer herself with a little help from Eric Selvig, who makes a very brief cameo during a video call. Unfortunately, their efforts are not working. Jane spots some Viking myth books on her desk and hears a voice call to her, which is actually Mjolnir. While Thor and Jane were dating one night, Thor whispered to Mjolnir to always protect Jane, which creates a new symbol on the hammer and gives it another initiative. When Jane gets cancer, Mjolnir follows Thor's protection order and calls out to Jane. She follows the call and heads to New Asgard, where she goes on Daryl's tour that takes her to the location where the pieces of Mjolnir rest. They're all sitting in a glass dome on top of a podium that stands in the same place where they fell after Hela broke the hammer in Thor Ragnarok. Don't ask me how they got the pieces from the ground to the podium unless Thor moved them piece by piece but still wanted them in the same spot where they originally fell, but whatever. As the tour group moves on, Jane stops to have a closer look. It's at this point that the fragments react to her presence and converge to form Mjolnir again, turning Jane into Mighty Thor. Throughout the movie, Thor treats Mjolnir and Stormbreaker like relationships, and Stormbreaker acts like a girlfriend, showing signs of intelligence similar to Doctor Strange's Cloak of Levitation. Stormbreaker gets jealous whenever Thor talks to Mjolnir, so Thor has to go appease it. He even shares a drink with it at one point. Thor also treats Mjolnir as though it's Jane's new boyfriend, sometimes getting jealous of it. During Gorr's attack on New Asgard, we see Astrid, Heimdall's son. Heimdall doesn't have a son in the comics, and I couldn't find any character that he could be replacing, so this seems to be a brand new character created just for the MCU. Astrid's mother is Grace, who also doesn't seem to have any comic book connections. Astrid didn't like his name, and so now he goes by Axl, which could be a nod to Axl Rose and the fact that almost the entire soundtrack of the movie is Guns N' Roses. Sweet Child of Mine, November Rain, Welcome to the Jungle, there's a lot of GNR in this movie. Thor meets Jane while Gorr is invading, but they pause their conversation so Thor can fight Gorr. When it seems as though Gorr is about to lose, he uses his shadow monsters to kidnap the children of New Asgard, including Axl. Since Axl is Heimdall's son, he also has Heimdall's eyes and all of his abilities, which means he can project Thor to their location just like Heimdall did in Thor Ragnarok. Later on in the movie, it's also hinted that Axl is basically going to take over Heimdall's duties in the future. It's not hard to envision him joining the Young Avengers, or possibly even taking Night Thrasher's spot in the New Warriors, since we have a number of members from that team in the MCU already or coming soon. Either way, it wouldn't be surprising if Marvel has plans for Axl in future movies and Disney Plus shows. Thanks to Axl's vision, Thor discovers that Gorr is taking the children to the Shadow Realm, which is the moon-like object seen here. The children are in the cage on top of the landmass that's moving toward the moon. Thor wants to raise an army to defeat Gorr, so Valkyrie, Thor, Jane, and Korg all travel to Omnipotence City, which is what most people assumed was Olympus in the trailers. It's actually a location pulled straight from Thor comics, which serves as a nexus of all gods. There are a lot of god cameos and name drops while Thor and crew are here, including Ra, Hercules, Zeus, Bass from Black Panther, Bao, the god of dumplings, as well as 2 Celestials. The Celestials are never identified, but they could be Devron the Experimenter and Gamiel the Manipulator, 2 Celestials assigned to watch over Earth in the comics. There's also an off chance they could be the Red-Blue Judge or Zeron the Tester, but it's difficult to say with such a brief appearance. As usual, Zeus is planning to have an orgy and needs to decide on a location, but Thor interrupts this very important decision. When Thor asks for an army, this angers Zeus, who refuses to help them fight Gorr because he doesn't want to die, since the Necrosword can kill gods. It's usually very difficult to kill gods in the MCU, which means they generally do as they please, like having random orgies. With Gorr, all these carefree gods are now afraid to die, so they'd rather stay in Omnipotence City, where Gorr can't find them because that location is known only to the gods. Due to this fact, Zeus won't let Thor leave because Gorr can see into the hearts and minds of people thanks to the powers of the Necrosword. If he ends up discovering their location through Thor, they could all die. Obviously, this doesn't go over well with Thor and his team. Valkyrie also thinks Zeus's Thunderbolt would be a useful weapon against Gorr because it's around the same power level as Stormbreaker and other godly weapons. So Team Thor attacks Zeus and his guards, which ends with Korg getting hit by the Thunderbolt and losing his body, but keeping his mind and remaining alive. Thor then throws the Thunderbolt through Zeus's chest, seemingly killing him, before Valkyrie collects the weapon for herself. Zeus is still alive too, by the way. There's a little nod to Wolverine when they reference Weapon X, although they're referring to actual weapons, not the mutant, but still. Side note, we also learned that Korg had two fathers and can grow his body back over time, kind of like Groot. Thanks to Zeus, we learned that Gorr's plan is to get to eternity. In the comics, eternity is basically the embodiment of the universe. There's one in every universe within the multiverse, and they exist as a fraction of the larger multiversal eternity. Eternity protects the universe and generally only manifests itself when there's a threat to the universe. However, this seems to be a bit different in the MCU. In Love and Thunder, Eternity is at the center of the universe, and the first person to reach him will be granted a single wish. Gorr's wish would be to kill all gods. As the movie starts to come to an end, Team Thor travels to the Shadow Realm to face Gorr. On the way, Thor and Jane hook back up. Once they arrive, they discover that Gorr needs Stormbreaker's ability to summon the Bifrost in order to open the gate to eternity. The Bifrost isn't actually used, it's just that's the level of power needed to open the gate to eternity, so your average person couldn't just stumble upon it and make a wish. During the fight, the goats join in on the battle, as they do in the comics from time to time, which ends with Valkyrie getting stabbed by Gorr and the team having to head back to Earth to get her medical attention. For now, they're unable to save the children. Just as Thor summons the Bifrost, Gorr grabs Stormbreaker and pulls it from him, leaving Thor and crew on Earth, but Gorr is still in the Shadow Realm, now with Stormbreaker, and heading to the center of the universe to unlock the gate to eternity. Back on Earth, Thor learns that Jane can't heal from the cancer because all of her mortal strength is being used up when she's Mighty Thor. If she transforms again, it will likely kill her. This is a little bit in contrast to earlier in the movie when Jane's cancer treatments weren't working anyway. With that in mind, it wouldn't matter if Jane changed into Mighty Thor or not because she'd die either way, but yay for plot holes. Thor asks Jane to remain on Earth and survive while he travels to the center of the universe to stop Gorr and save the children. Once Thor arrives and finds the children, he grants them the power of Thor and they all become able warriors to fight off Gorr's shadow monsters while Thor fights Gorr. This is similar to how Mjolnir turned Jane into Mighty Thor and how Thor whispered to Mjolnir so that it protected Jane. To keep it simple, Thor borrowed power from the gods and granted it to all of the children. Thor told them to find a weapon from the debris scattered in the area, to which one child just uses her stuffed teddy bear, and he empowers all of their weapons, making them all little warriors with great power and fighting ability. Again, it's the same concept as Jane picking up the hammer and suddenly knowing how to fight as Mighty Thor. Thor is losing to Gorr and about to die when Jane shows up riding Valkyrie's horse and attacks Gorr while Thor stops Stormbreaker from opening the gate. Thor is able to free Stormbreaker from Gorr's shadow vines that have it stuck in the ground and forcibly opening the gate. But it's a little bit too late as the gate is now open. Jane and Thor are able to break the Necrosword, which merges with Mjolnir for a moment and weakens Jane as soon as she touches Mjolnir again. Throughout the movie, when Jane attacks with Mjolnir, it has the ability to separate into individual shards to attack multiple enemies, then it flies back to Jane and reforms. As the pieces were flying back to her, they went through the shattered Necrosword, kind of merging with Mjolnir and causing Jane to get partially cursed, losing her focus long enough to let the cancer run its course. Thor tosses Stormbreaker to Axel so he can take the kids back to New Asgard, then rushes to Jane's aid, knowing she's on the verge of death. While this is happening, Gorr, now in a weakened state thanks to the Necrosword breaking, walks through the gate to eternity. Jane and Thor follow Gorr into a room that looks like a white, heavenly version of the Soul Stone realm in Infinity War, where Thanos goes after killing Gamora and executing his first snap. Thor pleads with Gorr not to kill the gods, suggesting he bring his daughter back instead. Thor won't put up a fight and will allow the wish to happen because Jane is dying and he'd rather spend their last remaining moments together rather than fighting Gorr. At this point, Jane is no longer in her Mighty Thor form and is almost dead, while Gorr is in a similar position since the Necrosword was all that was keeping him alive. To explain the weapons in more detail, Gorr was on the verge of death when he came across the Necrosword, which essentially corrupted him while also giving him godlike powers. As soon as the Necrosword was destroyed, he lost those powers and the ability to stay alive. He now only has a few moments left to live. Similarly, Jane is dying of cancer. While she is healthier as Mighty Thor, it also takes all of her strength to maintain that form. That means that as soon as she goes back to normal Jane, she is immediately hit with the effects of cancer again. Just before the final battle, it becomes clear to Thor that Jane's only chance to live is to never become Mighty Thor again. But Jane is also connected to Thor now through the hammer and knows that he's losing the fight with Gorr and about to die. Mjolnir also alerts her of the threat by hovering by her side at the hospital, ready for battle. Jane decides that saving Thor and the children is more important than her own life, so she grabs the hammer, becomes Mighty Thor again, and goes to help Thor. Gorr decides that bringing his daughter back to life is more important than killing all of the gods. But since he's about to die, she won't have a father. Jane and Thor assure Gorr that Thor will raise the child. They don't develop this part of the plot very well since the movie moves so fast, so let's dive in a little deeper here. Gorr's main reason for killing all the gods is because he doesn't think they help any of the people who worship them. Gorr's own god allowed his daughter to die, then laughed in his face. In the comics, it wasn't just Gorr's daughter that died, it was all of his children and his wife. Gorr's parents also died when he was young, and his wife was pregnant when she died. Gorr's people were very religious, so this hurt him even more that his gods would abandon him. So he lost a lot more in the comics, making his anger toward the gods much more clear and even relatable in some ways. Seeing that Thor would rather spend his final moments with the dying Jane Foster instead of attempting to stop Gorr from killing every god, this is enough to give Gorr a change of heart. Gorr's daughter was the most important person in his life, and having her back and cared for has more significance than getting revenge on gods that he isn't even affiliated with. Gorr makes his wish, resurrecting his daughter, then shares a final moment with her. While this is happening, Thor says goodbye to Jane as she disappears into dust just like Odin did in Thor Ragnarok. This signifies that Jane is now considered a Norse warrior and will go to Valhalla just like Heimdall and the rest of the Asgardians who have fallen in battle. In the final moments of the film, the children are reunited with their families back in New Asgard. Valkyrie and a one-armed Sif train the children to become warriors, with Sif specifically focusing on Axel. Meanwhile, Thor is living with Gorr's daughter, who happens to have the powers of a god since she was brought back to life by eternity. She has eye beams and seemingly superhuman strength. Since all of Gorr's children die in the comics and don't come back to life, this is a brand new character in the MCU. We don't actually get a name for her, but she's referred to as Love to Thor's Thunder. In addition, she's played by Chris Hemsworth's daughter, India Rose Hemsworth, and during an interview, Hemsworth said that his daughter is playing the character Love. It's hard to say if that's the character's real name, but that's all we have to go on for now. There's a very slim chance that this is the MCU's version of Mistress Love, one of the most powerful beings in the universe, although still well below the power level of Eternity and the Living Tribunal. It's a long shot, but not completely out of the question that this is a young version of Mistress Love. Anyway, we see Thor and his new daughter making breakfast, then heading into battle on some random planet with the new family wielding both Mjolnir and Stormbreaker. Since Mighty Thor is dead at the moment, Mjolnir is free to be used by Thor and his new daughter, and with this battle scene, the movie comes to an end. Of course, there are also 2 post-credit scenes, and you can find our video covering both scenes in the description and pinned comment below. For now, that wraps up this video. If you have any questions or you'd like additional explanation, feel free to leave a comment below. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with someone who loves Thor and Marvel.